Welcome, fellow marketers and friends. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the AMA event, What the Metaverse Means for Marketing. I am Melanie Brockway, the AMA Southern Connecticut Chapter President for the 22-23 board year. In just a moment, I'm going to hand this off to Ben Coons, this evening's panel moderator. But before I do, just want to let you all know we are recording this event, and we will be sharing the video via email to everyone who has registered for the event. So if for whatever reason you're not able to join tonight or you have to jump off early, you will get a recording of the full event. If during the event you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat below. We have reserved some time at the end for Q&A at the end of the session. And now I'm super duper happy to introduce our chapter's VP of Programming and moderator extraordinaire for this evening's event, Ben Coons.
Thank you, Mel. Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Coons, EVP Strategy and Media Associates and board member of the American Marketing Association. And I am super thrilled today. We have a very exciting group of panelists. What we're going to be talking about is what the metaverse means for marketers. And I came across an interesting stat in our research for tonight that in 2021, the estimated global market for the metaverse is $62 billion. But the projection is by 2030, it's going to grow 25x to something like $1.6 trillion. So I know there's been a lot of talk about the metaverse with Facebook rebranding, with Mark Zuckerberg having a cartoon avatar, a little bit of skepticism perhaps. But today we're going to explore that and look really beyond that as to how marketers need to engage as consumers really use this technology potentially to become better versions of themselves. So we have three great panelists today. I want to introduce them. Eli Santos is founder of Metavertising. Eli leads one of the leading podcasts on metaverse technology out of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Second, we have Adam Ragsdale, CEO of Voca and head of Zero Gravity Labs. Adam is an entrepreneur who helps companies do storytelling in the metaverse, and he's also got some interesting music connections in Web3 as well. But we're going to lead off a little different format. We have a very exciting guest, Alvin Wang Graylin. Alvin is China president at HTC. HTC is a leading company in metaverse technology for consumers and businesses. Alvin has quite the bio. I was reading your LinkedIn. He's vice chairman of the Industry of Virtual Reality Alliance. He's president of the $18 billion Virtual Reality Venture Capital Alliance. And my favorite, he actually studied artificial intelligence 20 years ago. So we should have a riveting panel. And what we're going to do is we're going to let Alvin speak a little bit on his vision for the metaverse, and then we're going to segue into a panel discussion later. So Alvin, over to you.
Thanks, Ben. It's a big intro to follow, but let me share my screen here. All right, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so well, thank you, Ben, and thank you, Melanie, for inviting me, and I'm really looking forward to this chat. I actually used to run a digital agency many years ago, so I'm I guess somewhat familiar with some of the issues that we deal with, and also understand the challenges and the challenges from the client side as well. So hopefully I'll try to we can go into some of those details. Whoa, sorry, something's happened to my chair. So we can go into some of those details later during the discussion. But you know, as Ben mentioned, the metaverse is definitely a very hot topic, and hopefully in the next 20 minutes or so, I'll help everybody understand, at least come to a common understanding of what it is and how it impacts the marketing scene and what we actually should be doing to try to create a positive outcome. Because there's a lot of fear that if advertising's not done properly, that it can create an even more negative result than some of the I guess negative ramifications of what social networks and online advertising and privacy concerns have done to the internet so far. So hopefully this is becomes some positive data or useful data for everybody who's involved in this space. So one thing I do want to also stress is that the metaverse is something that's going to be more than just a technology. It's something that replaces our senses. So we will be able to do so much more from a creative perspective, from a media perspective than anything that's been done before. And in fact, I had studied VR 30 years ago with Tom Furness, who's the godfather of VR. So I've been involved in this area and then kind of seen it grown over the last 30 years. So it's actually, it's amazing to see how fast the last 5-10 years things have really changed, because the first 20, nothing really happened. And I was actually quite disappointed. But now I'm super hopeful of what the potential of this technology will do for us and how it's going to change media as a whole. So, the term metaverse, as everybody knows, it's been all the news. It's all, it came from Snow Crash's book or the Neil Stephenson's book, Snow Crash. And, it's talked about in Ready Player One, and it's alluded to in the Matrix. But I think one thing I do want to point to is that the word metaverse is usually associated with kind of cyberpunk, and cyberpunk is usually a shitty real world with a fantastical virtual world. And I would like us to at least try to avoid the first part. And the technology, doesn't have to end up poorly. And in fact, I was having lunch with Neil Stephenson, and I asked him, I said, is it possible to do a proper sci-fi novel and make it interesting while it's still utopian? And he said, it's hard, but probably the only thing I can think of that did it well was Star Trek, where, essentially it was in almost a perfect world, and the only thing that was somewhat negative was some outside that universe, outside their system. So it's something interesting. So the reason these worlds in these books and stories are negative is not necessarily because that's the natural tendency. So I do want to avoid the fear that if we go through this technology transition, that it has to end badly. So first, I think there's so many definitions out there. I want to make sure I define or kind of point out some of the myths out there. What are the kind of common myths of what people think the metaverse is, and I'll tell you kind of what what my views are on those. There's people who say, hey, the metaverse is just VR, AR, XR. No, actually, the VR, AR, XR is just one of the interfaces for getting into the metaverse. Okay. There's people that say, oh, it's all about social and gaming. Yes, social and gaming will be important parts of the metaverse, but it's only one use case, or two use cases in this new system or service. Some people say, oh, it's all about digital twins. It's about another version of the physical world. No, actually, the digital twin is also a useful use case. But if you think about it, if you can have any world you want, why does it have to only be limited to the physical world that we're in? Right? People say, oh, it's going to, create endemic escapism. People are just going to go and flood in there and never come out. We've actually done some studies on the addictive nature of it, and it's definitely more attractive than 2D content or gaming. But it is definitely not something that makes everybody addicted. There's also people who say, no, all this is going to be totally dystopian, as I mentioned in the beginning, and there's somebody going to say, oh, this is going to be great, it's going to solve everybody's problems. No, neither one of those is going to be true. So it's going to be in between, but it's really up to us to see kind of what we do and which end of that spectrum we land on. There's a lot of people who will say, oh, this is just a niche, it's a fad, in 2 years nobody will care about it, remember 3D TV, that kind of stuff. And no, actually, I think this is going to be a very different thing, because it is not a single trend. It's actually the continuation of a 30 or 40 year trend of the digitalization of our lives. So that is definitely going to happen. There are people who say, oh, come to my metaverse. The metaverse is here. And then there'll be people who say, this is pure science fiction. It'll never be here. Both of those are wrong. It's going to take time. It's not here yet. It's going to take 5-10 years. But when it gets here, it's going to be very impactful. And it is not pure science fiction. It's gonna get here. So don't be despaired. And there's going to be companies who say, hey, I'm making the metaverse, I'm making a metaverse. No, actually, the metaverse is really the next generation of the internet. And so there's really going to be one metaverse. There may be, worlds in the metaverse, there may be, sectors in the metaverse, but there is really only one major metaverse. Just like we have one internet, we don't say, oh, there's a, industrial internet. It doesn't make sense. So some people will say, hey, you have to buy virtual land because, in the metaverse, you got to have your own land, or you have to have your own NFT. No, I mean, kind of the NFT and virtual land might be part of this, but it is definitely not a requirement. And then there are also people who say it has to be decentralized. It's, Web3 is the metaverse. No, actually, I have a slide on that. So, all of these things have some level of truth to them, but it is definitely not the whole truth. So I want to make sure that people don't have a misunderstanding. So here's kind of, this is at least some of the top things I feel like I want people to realize. It is not just as simple as a lot of people think. So I do want to have one slide on kind of the Web3 metaverse comparison, because a lot of marketers today are really kind of conflating the two. And when people talk about, metaverse marketing, they're like, oh yeah, we're going to do NFT campaigns. Yeah, okay, that could be one way you can interpret it. But I want to make sure you understand, at least from my perspective, these are completely two separate movements, two separate technology stacks. One is really, the metaverse is really about, immersive technologies, natural interfaces, using 3D and 3D content, cloud, lots of AI in the back, with a kind of open and immersive experience as really the core. And really a lot of it targeted towards a social multi-user experience, right? That's really the kind of some of the keywords that are the crux of it. Whereas for Web3, it's really about crypto, about blockchain technologies. Use cases are in NFTs and DAOs and DApps, and its focus is about decentralization. How do we decentralize the financial system? It's mostly focused on financial and transactional systems. So one is really about experience, one is really about transactions. Right? Now there's definitely an overlap between the two. There's going to be use cases where you put the two together, but there's also going to be a centralized use cases for the metaverse. There's going to be non-crypto use cases for the metaverse. So I want to make sure that people kind of don't confuse the two. So the way I would think about it is, one is 3D web, one is kind of Web3. Maybe that helps to, in kind of very short words, explain the difference between the two. Now, so I've said all the things of what is not the metaverse. At least I'll give you my perspective of what is the metaverse. And from kind of my experience working with clients, with customers, with users, the more simple you are, the better, because there's so many definitions out there, and a lot of definitions actually fit like a whole page on your slide, right? I'm sure you've seen some of them. I won't put them up, but so my perspective is, here's the easy way to think about it. The metaverse to me is the 3D version of the internet, powered by AI and interface through XR technologies. Now, I'm not saying it has to be interfaced through XR technology. In fact, for the first many years, multiple years, most people on the metaverse will actually be using 2D devices, because there just aren't as many XR devices out in the market yet. Right? So I think that's something I want to point out. So, and then people have been talking about the value, like Ben just said, and it's going to be $1.5 trillion or $25 billion this year or stuff. I think there's a lot of numbers out there. So I do want to kind of give, I know people in marketing are very analytical. So I want to give some formulas that might be interesting to you. I'm sure you guys have all heard of Metcalfe's law. So the value of the network is the square of its nodes, the number of people, or the number of network endpoints, etc. So I think that's actually a little bit too simplistic a formula to calculate the value of the metaverse. So what is the value of the metaverse? Now, the key factors to me to make the metaverse successful and large is actually these things. So it's the number of open worlds, the number of users using it on 2D, the number of users using it in XR, and the amount of time, the average amount of time per person they spend in world. So I think if you take the product of those, and one key item I want to emphasize is the N of XR squared. Because if you go back to Metcalf, actually Metcalf was one of my professors at MIT, so I'm actually very familiar with how he thought about this. But the reason I actually made the N of XR squared is because in the limit of this, a longer term, everybody will be using an XR device, because XR device will replace all 2D screens over time. But in the near term, actually, most people will be using it in a 2D screen. And in the 2D screen, you just don't have a full immersive experience. And you're not able to gather all of the value in there. And you won't really want to spend as much time. So I take a kind of discount to it. But at the limit, when everybody's in XR, you actually get to the proportion of the value is proportional to N squared. So I just wanted to mention that. And in the beginning, there will be actually very few worlds. But as we get to the worlds where every single website today will actually be replaced by a world, then you get to the long-term value. So this is why you're able to get to these giant numbers that are being forecasted, because there's just so much potential to grow the number of worlds, to grow the amount of time. I mean, the average time people are spending are minutes per day right now. And people are forecasting that in a few years, it'll be hours per day. I think in about 10 years, it'll probably be somewhere in the 5 to 10 hours a day that we'll be spending in these virtual environments. So, here's a thing. This chair keeps, sorry. So, some of the numbers that are out there, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Citibank, they're all talking numbers even bigger than what Ben talked about. So they're talking about in 10 years, it's going to be $8 to $13 trillion. Right? Essentially, pretty much another major country. This is like China, I think is number 2 country. They're about 14 or 18 trillion dollars. So it's almost the size of another China being created in the virtual world over the next 10 years. That's pretty amazing. And HTC has been playing a very important role in this space. So, since 2016, when we released the first VIVE, we've been innovating in every major technology innovation in this industry. Every hardware innovation has actually been initiated by HTC. The first 6-stop devices, the first wireless PC VR, the first 6-stop standalone, the first the standalone thin and light device, like the one that we have on the right here, the VIVE Flow. So we've been really pushing the envelope forward, and we've also been pushing the open message forward, because our app store, the VIVE Port, is actually the only store in the world that is across all of the major brands. And any hardware you use, you can actually get onto our app store. So compared to so many other people. But I do want to emphasize that for a lot of customers, they're going to use their phones and their PCs for the initial period to get onto the metaverse and to get onto pieces of what becomes the metaverse. So, I don't want people to think that it's all about XR. Okay. Now, a little history in terms of kind of screen evolution. If you look at this chart, you'll think, oh shit, we're going to have 20 different screens in our lives. 100 years ago, we had no screen. 120 years ago, we had no screens. And then, we had the Lumiere brothers with their cinema, the big screen. And, gradually every, 10, 20 years, we've got another screen. But so, you think, shit, we're going to have, things on our, phones and heads and blah, blah, blah. And it's true. We're having a lot of small gadgets that are being put into it, but there's going to be fewer and fewer screens, because the screens that we have will actually be replaced by a device on our head. And the device on our head is going to create virtual screens that could be any size, and actually probably even more important, virtual environments that will surround us. And the 3D environment is how humans have evolved. And it is the best screen that we can have. So having a fully movable 3D environment will actually allow us to have the most fulfillment, most entertainment, most amount of learning, etc. So that over time, in another 50 years, we'll probably go back to no screens again, because we're going to have a chip in the back of our head that connects to the 7G or 8G or 9G network, and we don't have to worry about having to the device attached to our head anymore. So So just kind of give everybody. In fact, I've tried the contact lenses, and they do work, but it's probably still 10 years away for it to be commercial. So that technology will definitely be getting smaller and smaller. And you know, the one key thing about XR technology and what's happening is that because it uses and adapts to all of our senses. It is the most direct connection to our brain that we have today of any medium, and it's the fullest way that we can communicate to each other outside of being face to face. Right. So as advertisers or marketers, you definitely want to leverage but also respect the power of this medium. And as Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the message, and I think it's truer in this particular medium than anything that we've seen, because the medium is the world that you will be inhabiting, right? So it is not just the message; it is the reality for you for that moment that you're in there. So it is a very I guess important transition in media space. So I'm sure you guys have seen this particular chart, which is kind of the change in consumption time over the last 10 years. And there's going to be dramatic drop-off, continue to drop off in TV and radio. And media will continue in the mobile side. I think will be more and more important. And in Asia, very few people actually watch TV. Most of them watch their TV or video on their phone or a tablet, right? But in another 10 years, I think there's going to be a major transition. In fact, probably in the next 4 or 5 years, there's going to be a transition point where the mobility will actually be better on your head than it is in your pocket. And at that point, we're going to be spending, instead of 11 hours a day right now in media, we're going to be spending 16 hours a day, which is pretty much all of our waking hours. But part of it will be in transparent mode, because the devices that we have, we have here for those people who haven't seen the flow. I mean, it's a very small device, and it's it looks like glasses. You can fold up, and stick it into your pocket. So I have it in my bag every day, in my backpack, and when I travel, I'm on a plane, I actually use it. And because it is so portable, and devices are going to be even a fraction smaller, a lot smaller than that going forward. So I'm sure you guys have seen this guy, right, from Ready Player One. And this is what people think the future of advertising is going to be.
It's not our job to make them happy. It's our job to make them fun. But once we launch this little baby, they're going to call this pure ocean. Upgrades once we can roll back some of holiday ad restrictions. We can sell up to 80% of an individual's visual field before inducing seizures.
Okay, so don't be this guy. Okay, the technology is there to do a lot of stuff, and as I mentioned, there's so many potential. But don't try to maximize the money on the table with this technology. Okay, so here's some data I wanted to share with you, because I know you guys are very data driven. God dang it. Yeah. Okay, sorry, my chair here is not cooperating. So we've done studies with the kind of brainwave analysis, EEG, to see how does people's concentration change when they're in a traditional learning environment versus a VR learning environment, and 6x the amount of concentration. And when you have 6x the concentration, you actually have much better learning, right? So the immediate test, and the average grade is an A, and for the traditional class, it's B-. And a week later, the VR class remembered more, did better in post-test than the traditional class immediate test, right? So the potential of this is just amazing. Okay, here's another piece of data, and this is more advertising specific. So and the reason I put the education one is because advertising is just a form of education. You're just educating on your brand, on the features, on the benefits. But in this case, we put people into a 2D environment and a 3D environment, and how much do people spend time gazing and looking at these different ads? And you're getting about a 2.7x in terms of activity. In terms of amount of time spent is like 2.8, or gaze duration 2.8 times. If you then put humans into this it actually goes up from 2 point something to 3.1x, the increase in terms of gaze duration. And then you start able to in XR, you also have the benefit of having to do gaze analysis. So you know exactly what people are looking at for how long. So the amount of data you have as a marketer also increases significantly. And you find that on attention, on memory, on interest, on understanding, on favor, I think that means the intent to support or endorse the product, all goes up multi-x. Okay. Another study that was done in 2009, that last study was actually just done this year. So this is a study that was done in 2019, and it compared VR experience, 6-dot VR experience to 360 video experience, to 2D video experience. And significantly, you can see increases in every aspect versus the more traditional media, even versus 360 video, which from a lot of people consider it to be pseudo XR VR. Okay. And the EEG signals are much higher. The memory retention is much better over time. Okay. I'm speaking very quickly because I have a lot of data, and I know you guys want to say it. If you need, I can share some of these slides with Ben afterwards. The other thing is the effectiveness of offline events versus online events. So this was something that also we wanted, or actually video events versus audio events versus VR events. You can see the brainwave and how much it actually increases. So it's like a 2.6x in terms of the increase in terms of interest and enthusiasm when you're participating in an event. So we're having a video event, we're kind of having the middle level of interest. But if we did this in XR and you're able to walk around, and actually HTC has held multiple offline, multiple in VR, in-world events for thousands of people at a time, and some in cases tens of thousands. And the ability for people to create personal relationship and contacts just like you do an offline event. That's the amazing part. And this data is very clear in showing that. So the amount of focus people have during the event, the interest in socializing increases, everything is positive in terms of from an event-based perspective. Okay. In terms of in the 3D world, the amount of communication. So we actually, this study was just done 2 months ago. And you're finding a 4x in terms of people wanting to come up and talk to you in a 3D world versus in a 2D social environment. And strangers responding to you in a 3D world, because you're actually walking up to another person's avatar and you're talking to them. It's much more likely to respond to you. So if you get a spam mail, you're probably getting 0.01% response rates, right? But maybe even lower. But if you're getting a stranger walking to you in a 3D world and talking to you, 75% of them will actually say hi and talk to them. Some people may feel like, oh, that's too much contact. And just for your choice, for your information, if you ever want to choose whether you want to be a human or an animal, you actually get higher response rates as a human, as an animal, than you do as a human in the virtual world. So pick your avatars carefully. And if you want to be really contacted, females actually have much higher than males, which is expected. So a female animal, you're gonna get it, you're gonna kill it. And we actually talked to a lot of people about their concerns in terms of privacy and data, and actually it's not too bad. It's about the for a traditional media versus virtual media, the concerns are very similar. So it's not like there's less concern, but it's also not like there's major more concerns. The only, I think there's a slight difference in terms of, am I releasing some of my bio data? Is there more personal interest information being shown? But outside that, they're still around the same range. Okay. In terms of social gaming, what we found is the addictive index in terms of how much people are unwilling to leave a service is about 2x. So it is significant, and it goes across the board in terms of their awareness or their motivation and their behavioral aspects of using the medium. So it is something that can be more addictive. So I think from a platform provider, social media provider, or world operator, be very sensitive to that, because if you use some of the same mechanics, it's actually going to work 2x better than it does today in terms of making people stay in your world. And I don't know if we really want to be so manipulative. Okay, so I want to make sure that people at least understand that that's possible. Now, here's another study that we recently just did. When was this? About 6 months ago, and it was using virtual NPCs that was talking to children. And we were having them become more tolerant, more communicative with their parents, clean up their rooms, all these things. And what we found is that there is significant increase. You can see that the charts are kind of almost double in terms of their attitude scores from before to after. And then we actually went back and had their parents evaluate how much they change their behavior over time. And you can see there's significant increase in offline behavior that is tied to those attitudinal changes. So, and we had these children talk to these AI NPCs, and they thought they were just little animals, little bears, little foxes, but they were researchers in another room pretending to be these animals. But you can see that having a character communicate with you actually can change your mind. This was about a month-long exercise. So every day these kids came in for an hour a day. So it's you can see that over time there's initially there's very little impact actually, but probably after about 10-15 days they started to build friendships and trust, and that effect came up very quickly. Okay, so again, the potential for using NPCs to influence people is very high. I think it's actually our responsibility as marketers not to do it because it is actually too powerful and manipulative. Over time, I think people are going to spend more and more time. I actually said 16 hours a day in your classes and in your headset. But this guy actually spent 7 days in his headset, sleep, taking a shower, cooking, all wearing different headsets. This is a couple, maybe 3-4 years ago. He made a video, but I won't show you the video. It's a little too long. But I do want to share data that just came out yesterday that we've been working with the Communication University of China, and it was longer term study. It's not that one was 7 days. This one was 60 days in a row that they had people come in every day for at least 3 hours. Some people more to use they did it in people's homes. So they put this thing in the home, and people can do it whenever they want it, but they want to see how long they would use it. But they said use it for at least 3 hours a day. And we want to see what was the kind of impact of somebody who didn't use VR much before, and now you're using it 3 hours a day. How does it change your biometrics at all? From terms of sleep, it really didn't change it. I think it was at 0.21% of sleep, deep sleep time over, because we gave them all, arm trackers or wrist trackers to really measure the deep sleep amount. We looked at the eye acuity, and essentially no change over that period, even with this many hours a day of sustained use. And in terms of heart rate, so when you're before you use it, after you use it, you can see that there's actually a small change in terms of heart rate. And that essentially what that's talking about is that it's using XR is actually equivalent to a light amount of exercise, like walking. So your heart rate goes up a little bit, and it's sustained over time. So what it means that it's actually a very active thing that could be actually healthy for you, because it creates the daily activities that a lot of people are concerned about. Because I know there are people who watch like Wall-E, and you see these giant people who just sit there eating milkshakes or drinking milkshakes every day. Hopefully, actually having VR or XR becoming your primary interface may make you more active, because you're standing up, you're moving, you're talking, you're bending over to do things, versus using a keyboard and mouse. And people are spending probably 6-8 hours a day for a lot of people in front of their screens, and that's definitely more unhealthy for your body. So at the end of the day, it's about creating stories, right? Marketing, movies, everything, right? And the difference is, as marketers, these stories people can walk into, and that's something that gives them a completely different level of experience, because you're the participant in that story. In fact, we worked with Steven Spielberg on the Ready Player One movie, and he used our device.
This is the Oasis, a whole virtual universe
in, you put on the really high fidelity headset VR, and
Yeah, that was our first generation VIVEs.
Scout it virtually. And of course, because he's a filmmaker, as soon as he would start walking around a location, he would start thinking about shots.
I needed to know where to put my camera, so they created an avatar for me that you never get to see. But my avatar had a virtual camera. I could either do frame grabs, or I could do actual shots by walking through the virtual sets. I'm getting shots on a V cam in a V world. This is crazy.
So in fact, we were very lucky that in our deal, they also gave us all the 3D models of the Ready Player One movie, and we made 7 different games from it. And that year was the #1 download on the VIVE port by far, right? So so in fact, there's a scene of a VIVE logoed VR device in one of the scenes if you look carefully. So speaking of movies, there's always a hero in the movie, and in this case, we're talking about a new technology. I think every technology is a two-edged sword, right? So it's really about how you use it. And I think throughout the earlier presentation, I've been talking about kind of the impact of it, but how do you use it? It's really our responsibility to make sure that we use it properly. And as our favorite superhero says, with great responsibility or great power comes great responsibility. So I really want to make sure that as marketers, you guys realize the power of it, but you really respect the potential harm you could do if you don't do it right. So here's kind of my tips for marketers. Safety guidelines that everybody should think about following. One is enable audience transparency, because inside these worlds, you're not going to have a little tag that says sponsor or ad on it. How do you make sure? So we need to make sure we overtly tell people, this NPC is actually a advertising, versus is your friend, it's somebody that looks like your friend talking to you with their virtual voice that sounds like them, right? That's very scary. And we continue to gather permission as we do today with digital marketing, right? We need to make sure that whatever data we collect, that we collect only what we need, because there's so much you could collect, all the biometric stuff, the eye tracking. If you're using cameras and your devices, you can see people's rooms. Don't save that information, right? Don't store it, because if you have it, you're going to misuse it or lose it. Protect people's privacy. Make sure that whatever data you do have, you're not sharing it, selling it outside. Whatever data you have, it doesn't get leaked, so it's in a protected, safe storage environment. And you give the user control over that data. They get to see it, they get to delete it, and some people, they want people to get value from it. That's the whole part of the Web3 connection of do you want to be able to sell it, have the customer themselves sell it or manage it. And also be mindful of that audience experience, because it's not just an ad that you can ignore, like on the screen today. If you have a banner ad, our brains are already kind of been programmed to tend to ignore things that are on the sides of the screens. But in this case, you're having an entire experience, and what will be left is a real memory, very similar to actually having experienced that in the real world. So making sure that whatever marketing experience that we create is not too I guess emotionally too inducive of potential post-traumatic experience, because if it's to create excitement, you can make something that really scares the heck out of somebody or really excites them, but those things can be harmful, particularly to children. So I wanted to emphasize that. And when children's brains are still early and forming, for them to distinguish the difference between the real and virtual world, it takes I think it's really after 10 or so when the brain gets fully mature, right? And don't engage in user manipulation. I think this technology, it is the most powerful communication medium we have, but it can also be misused. So a lot of the things I give you examples in, I want you to understand the potential of those, but a lot of it more to understand it so that you don't, or you limit how much you use it. So as I mentioned in earlier, VIVE is all about open ecosystem, because I think in open world, having the ability to go to any place from any device is really where the power just comes from, and that's also where the power of the value of the internet comes from. So we've been, I won't go through all of these details, but that's really our philosophy about the metaverse. And I really hope that as marketers, you take that responsibility again. I want to remind you, that the future, how it turns out, is in our hands, and I really hope that we use that power properly. So thanks again. So I probably went over my time, Ben. I apologize. But so let's go back to the proper programming.
Well, thank you, Alvin. That was an amazing future vision. And I think the first question that comes to mind, and I want to pass it over to Eli and Adam. You talked in the first part about the timing, and I think marketers are looking at this, and it sounds like an amazing immersive future. But how far out is it? If you're thinking about the the Mark Zuckerberg avatar that people were kind of scoffing at, it looked a little rudimentary. So Eli, over to you. You talk a lot in the space with other marketers and technology companies. What is the timeline you're seeing?
That's a great question, because I would say it's hard to predict, because as Alvin said, I completely agree. There's a lot of technology that needs to come together in order for the metaverse to fully happen. Right now, if we were to consider the Gartner hype cycle, I would say right now we're in the disillusionment part, right? Because right now, like a lot of people, because of Mark Zuckerberg and his company Meta, and maybe because of some other stuff that happened before, a lot of people created a lot of expectation around the metaverse. And a lot of criticism that I hear around the metaverse is like, oh, isn't this supposed to be like the next best thing? Isn't this supposed to be like this huge deal that was supposed to change our lives? And it really is. I completely agree with it. However, like right now, I wouldn't say that the tech is here to make it fully immersive as some people are expecting. But however, it is immersive in some way already. And so for that reason, I would say my guess is like around 5, maybe a little bit more than that, 7 years, we will have like all of the technology nailed perfectly in order to have a fully immersive experience in the way that people can actually like feel like not only feel immersed in, but also at the same time, like really feeling this experience. And like, as Alvin said, like maybe being, if they're playing a horror game, maybe they're going to feel scared. If they're seeing an advertising, they really want to buy that product, considering that marketers are going to be honest and going to be transparent, right? And so I think for the metaverse to fully happen, it's going to take a few years still. We're still a little bit far off. However, I think as of now, we can create immersive experiences in a way that would surprise most of the people out there. And it would make them feel really that the metaverse is already here. So yeah.
And Adam, I know you're a creator in this space, so you're actually using these tools. So tell me a little bit, what's your perspective as someone who's actually creating stories in the metaverse? Are the tools close to mass adoption? What's your timeline?
That's a good question. I agree with what Alvin and Eli are saying as far as, just technology has a lot of catching up to do, obviously, especially the thing that I think I'm most interested to see how it plays out with interoperable networks, because you have platforms like Meta saying like we're gonna be building the metaverse, and like Alvin was saying, like they're gonna be pieces of the metaverse, just like Facebook is a piece of the internet, but they're not gonna be the internet. So that's gonna be really interesting to see like how those come together. But as far as storytelling goes, I have had the pleasure of being kind of on the forefront of storytelling, like as far as like Web3 goes. And I know that Web3 and the metaverse are completely different, like Alvin was saying. But I love what Matthew Ball talks about, how they're going to kind of grow simultaneously. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how they pick from each other. But as far as storytelling goes, yeah, like storytelling is happening right now, and just really cool, futuristic ways. Like what we're doing with Zero Gravity Labs is we're basically taking a sci-fi epic odyssey that we're creating with the global community, and they've bought characters that are represented as NFTs, and that gives them profit sharing capabilities, as we generate revenue from book sales and whatever that ends up looking like. And so it's been really cool to have utilize means like Discord for global calls each week, and I'm having a call with somebody in Belgium and London and North Carolina all at the same time, talking about a narrative, like a storyline that, we wouldn't be having that call without, Web3. And so, yeah, it's just, as far as timeline goes, it's really hard to know what inflated expectations are going to be, just because, like Eli was just saying, like there's just this huge question mark as to what will be globally adopted, technologically possible, how will the metaverse intertwine with Web3, and how will they both become normalized? What will users migrate towards? I mean, just the other day, a platform like Azuki, or a company organization like Azuki, is showcasing what they're calling PBTs, physical bound tokens. I think that's like a really just a bright step in the right direction as far as the use case of NFTs in the metaverse. And then, majority of the companies who will be most influential in the metaverse have yet to unveil what they're even doing. Like these massive entertainment companies like Disney and Universal, we have yet to see kind of what they're working on. And I think that that's just going to be like really, really insightful and impactful on the metaverse as a whole. But yeah, sorry, I just believe ideation is going to continue to severely outpace technological innovation. But that'll continue as, in the next 50 years even. So.
And you're segueing into my next question, which before we get to more marketing applications, I think the big question in the room is, Alvin, your HTC mission statement made me think of it. You have this wonderful mission statement to unleash human imagination from the limitations of reality. The idea is we'll be better versions of ourselves. But I have to ask, social media didn't quite turn out that way. People got a little, acrimonious, if you will. So what is the vision of how the metaverse will empower us? Alvin, if I were to ask you, how will it make us better? What is the optimal outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the difference. A lot of people talk about doing good. And I think we've been doing that the entire history of this company. And at every aspect, we've been trying to make the devices create the best experience out there. We always make sure that our content is available to everybody. We've never signed an exclusive with any of our developers, even ones that we invest in, to say that don't make your stuff available on other people's devices. We participate in every single standards organization to make sure that we allow these the devices to be more compatible, allow content to be more compatible, allow we worked with all of the major engine makers to allow it to be as easily created, portable across different devices as possible. So, and in fact, we've even given technology to some of our competitors in China through the VIVE program to get them out to market faster. Some of them actually uses our controllers, our hand controllers, because they couldn't build it. So we just gave them the technology. We sold them the devices so that they could get it out to market at a lower price than we sold it for. Right. So it's definitely accessibility is the first thing. So that's why we're so focused on the devices. But the other thing is really making sure that we are also helping with content. So HTC has invested in educational use cases. We have our art program that brings all of the world's culture and arts to make it available on the metaverse. We've been working with a lot of medical use cases to make sure that this technology is available to surgeons for practicing their surgeries before they happen, for physical therapy. In fact, one of the largest physical therapy providers are using our devices to work with people who've injured themselves, and they would do rehab inside XR, so that it's much more interesting. Because if you ever done physical therapy, you're just doing the same thing for hours, and it gets very boring. But if you turn it into a physical game where you're moving around, those kind of activities can be much more both boring and effective, less boring and more effective. So, I think those are some of the examples. But I think that from the network perspective, the real key is creating a more egalitarian society. If you listen to Warren Buffett, he says anybody in the U.S. has won the genetic lottery, because we're in a country where you have the most ability to be successful no matter who you were born to. And I tend to agree with that. So the fact that you put yourself into a global, open, interoperable metaverse, and everybody in the world now becomes equal in terms of their ability to be successful, their ability to be educated, their ability to find contacts, their ability to find employment is equal, right? No matter if you're male or female, tall or short, or rich or poor. If you have a device, if you're on the network, everybody can be represented by an avatar of their choice. So that I think is something that is very powerful and will provide a lot of long-term impact than what social networks are today. Because social networks are right now designed really as purely a communication system, right? Whereas the metaverse is actually going to be a full economy. It's going to be, people will work in the metaverse. People will spend their time, servicing other customers in the metaverse, and that's their main job. I don't know if you've read Neil Stephenson's Diamond Age, but in there are these actors that all they do is actually, they're the NPCs inside other people's worlds, and then they get paid for it, right? I think that's actually going to be a type of job that doesn't exist today, that will be great employment for a lot of people. So the potentials are really quite wide, and I don't know if we have much time for it, but we can go into more of this. But I think at the end of the day, it's again up to us in terms of how this actually gets executed. It can, if we take the mentality that we have today in terms of how social networks are operated, where you want to get as many clicks as possible, you want to get all the money on the table, you want to get people to stay as long as possible in your world, then we're going to have a screwed up metaverse. But if people follow some of the guidelines I mentioned, and if people take the perspective that this is a powerful new medium, a new technology, a new reality that's going to change the way we interact with each other, our relationships with each other, our relationships between machine and humans, I think that's going to potentially give us a much better world than we have today.
And another a related question, you showed Steven Spielberg actually using the technology. HTC on your website, you have a great sort of 5 major business applications from the metaverse. You talk about training, collaboration, design, obviously entertainment, and even sales and marketing. So there's a lot of business to business sort of utility. I'd like to get your take on those. What do you see the metaverse being used for each, and what might come out first?
I mean, B2B has actually been our major kind of focus in terms of our product and development for the last probably 4 or 5 years, actually. The first year, I think we were very consumer focused, but then actually a lot of businesses use our devices because they were so durable. But the last few years, I think we've really focused on making sure that we deliver a quality product that exceeds customers' expectations from the first day. And so, while other companies might be creating, low-end products and try to subsidize it and try to get it out to people when it's not ready, we actually maybe have higher priced product, but we have premium products that solves people's problems. And we provide things like the manageability that's needed for businesses. We provide the durability that's needed for businesses, and we provide the customer support and service and the network of developers, of the thousands of developers around the world that build solutions for businesses. So I think that's something that I think other companies are trying to get into recently, but we really feel like this is something that how technology gets adopted usually is from the business side first. And then the business side, because they have the higher ability to fund, they have the higher ability to get value from it. They're less price sensitive. And they're also more tolerant of the immaturity of the technology, because they have an IT department that can help them with these things. And they have the people that will come, SIs that will come in and train them, right? Whereas if you send one of our devices to like my mom, she can't even get her iPad to work. Every 2 days I get a call, my iPad's not working. I'm like, oh, have you tried to power it on? Or reboot it. It's just there's things like that where there's still a lot of friction in the devices today. And so for a lot of consumers, it's actually difficult for them to get used to having something on their head and then being able to push buttons that they can't see. It's still complicated.
I'd like to follow up with a related question for Eli. Alvin, you had an interesting chart showing device proliferation and then collapse, which I welcome because I buy too many devices. But beyond VR goggles, there are other ways in. And Eli, I'd like your take. We have screens, we have phones in our pockets. Dolby Research, their head of strategy, Poppy Crum, talked a lot about earpieces maybe being a way into a new world of augmentation. What's your take on the devices that marketers might think about as paths into the metaverse?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because just like Alvin said during his presentation, and I completely agree, I think now in the first few years of the existence of the metaverse, a lot of people are going to access the metaverse through their phones and through their computers. So if you take a look at, for example, Fortnite, Roblox, and even Zepeto, which are not, couldn't be considered technically metaverse platforms, but I like to call them metaverse-like games. So if you take a look at these platforms, you can use your phone, you can use your computer, and you can use consoles, PlayStation, Xbox. You can access it from several different devices. So I think ultimately, the platform that is going to win, just like some of the examples that Alvin has shared, are the platforms that are going to be enabling users to choose the medium that they prefer in order to have access to the experience that they want. And so I thought it was really interesting that you brought up audio, for example, because I feel that audio is not very well explored nowadays. So if you take a look at, for example, some of the stuff that Disney has done over the last few years using the Echo Dot device, using Alexa. So for example, Disney has developed some experiences that you can access using your Alexa. And basically it allows you to become the main character in a Disney story in an interactive way that develops through audio, right? So if you take a look at that as example and apply it to the next generation of personal assistants, which are the Alexas, the Siris, and like every other personal assistant that big brands are coming up with, I think we're going to be seeing like a directed, targeted, and very customized type of content on our earpieces as we go about our days and as we go around the city, or maybe as we travel, or maybe as we visit a different location. So I think that's also an opportunity for advertising right there and for good marketing, right? So I think, audio definitely is going to become something huge in the next few years. But I would say, there's not one particular medium that I would bet on, one particular device that I would definitely bet on. However, like the variety of devices, right? And making accessible for everyone, because the fact is, like, and I like to make this comparison with regular traffic of cars. If you take a look at the street, and you're going to see, like, during the day, during rush hours, you're going to see several different types of cars. Some are older, some are newer, because some people just can't afford the newer cars, but they still want to ride the street, right? So if you take a look at that example, I think the metaverse is going to be exactly the same way. A lot of people are not going to be able to maybe afford the latest devices. Some people will, some people won't, but a lot of people will still want to access the metaverse. So if you think about from that perspective, people are going to want to access it with their phones, their computers, their TVs, their consoles. So I would bet a lot more on the variety of devices rather than just a single medium.
I think a related question too, thank you, Eli, for marketers, is often the bridge from marketing to consumers is a technology or a media platform. Right now, if you work in marketing, you have to be aware of what Apple is doing, what Google is doing, what Facebook Meta is doing. So if you look ahead at the metaverse, who is the competitor platform set that marketers should be keeping an eye on? We have Hollywood, Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook, HTC. There are so many platforms, but who do you see as sort of leading the charge that marketers should start thinking about partnering with? Alvin, maybe you could take that one.
I'm not sure I understood the question. So it's like, which players are the ones that we should be looking at in terms of marketing?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of companies investing billions of dollars in metaverse technology. Do you have any forecasts for who some of the winners might be making it happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a little biased, so I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this. But I think that the key point is that with any new technology, there's going to be ultimately probably a few major winners, and we've seen that across the board as all technologies progress. And one other thing that's very interesting is that pretty much every major transition in technology over the last 50, 60 years, the winners of the last generation were most often not the winners of the next generation. So I guess that would be probably my answer. I don't want to give specific names and companies, but so I think that might be something that you can think about.
That's quite interesting. Adam, any take on who you think the ecosystem winners might be?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that's Alvin put it very great. It's hard to say, obviously, and like he said, like trending wise, I mean, it'll most likely be a new company that we haven't heard of yet, maybe, or you know what I mean. I think gaming is something that we should obviously all be on the lookout, even if you're not into gaming at all, just because right now, as far as technological advancements go, and the majority of users that are already used to those technological advancements and what the metaverse could potentially end up looking like or feeling like, gamers are on the forefront of what that could be, with obviously massive entities like Roblox and Fortnite and all that. So I think there's a lot to dive in and unpack with those companies, but I don't know if I can pinpoint a specific.
Another way to think of it too is certain industries are probably going to be leaning into the metaverse first. Matthew Ball, in his book, The Metaverse, talks about higher education being one industry that's ripe for disruption. The knock-on classes on Zoom being their substandard, but the metaverse might make them even better than reality. So let me ask the panelists, Eli, which industries do you think will be the first ones that marketers should be attuned to that are beyond gaming, taking off in the metaverse?
Good question. I think some of the industries that were mentioned earlier on in this session, I would definitely agree with some of that. So for example, for me personally, I think training and education are definitely going to become huge. Because the value is clear, right? So if you take a look at the data that Alvin has shared, people absorb the content a lot more and absorb the information a lot more if they are in an immersive environment, right? So if you take a look at that, that doesn't mean by itself, like you putting on a VR goggle, for example, and having a regular class, but in a VR goggle, right? This means that if you're studying dinosaurs, you're going to be able to take a look at the dinosaur, take a look at the size of the dinosaur, take a look at inside the dinosaur and look at their organs, for example. So it would be a lot more immersive. Or maybe if you're studying some type of medical procedure that requires a lot of care and attention, it would allow you to have a training in a non-invasive, non-intrusive, and harmless way, right? So you would be able to basically perform a training surgery in the most immersive way possible in a virtual environment, right? So I definitely think that education is definitely going to be one of the biggest ones early on, and this first, let's say in the short term, I would say. And then I will definitely take a look at entertainment, fashion, and obviously marketing as well. So if you take a look at entertainment, the metaverse is definitely going to transform the way that we consume content. So I firmly believe that if you take a look at the biggest platforms of today, they are successful because they have amazing content in them. So if you take a look at YouTube, for example, or maybe take a look at Twitch for the gamers out there that are watching this, potentially Adam is going to agree with me on this one. I'm not sure if you're a Twitch user, but like the reason why these platforms are so huge, and Instagram included as well, LinkedIn, is because they have great content in it. So if you take a look at entertainment, people are still going to be looking for ways to be entertained, for content to be consumed. So if you take a look at that, entertainment by itself is definitely going to become huge in that sense, because people are going to want content, and we're going to be able to create better ways of content, more immersive content, right? If you take a look at fashion, definitely, I think the metaverse is going to transform fashion, because an industry that is already big as of today is the avatar industry, right? So if you take a look at Fortnite, that was mentioned a couple of times, if you take a look at Roblox, users spend a lot of money in their skins in the game, right? Because they want to look different. They want to look like, for example, in Fortnite, you can look like Superman, and you can battle Darth Vader, for example, inside of Fortnite in the same environment. So you have to pay in order to look like Superman, or maybe look like Darth Vader, right? So fashion is definitely going to become a huge thing in the metaverse. And then to wrap it up, definitely marketing and sales, right? Because that is going to walk hand in hand with all of those industries, right? As long as Alvin said, and I reiterate, because I think that's extremely important, we keep being conscious around the stuff that we're creating as marketers in the metaverse, because we're going to be in such an immersive environment that there's going to be so many possibilities, and obviously the conversion is going to be higher. So definitely keeping conscious around that, I think it's the key to go when it comes to marketing in the future.
So I have two more questions, and then we'll open up to the audience for Q&A. The first question is probably the most important one for marketers on the call, and that question is, advertising has a bit of an issue in the metaverse. There's a stat that 50% of most media platforms get their revenue, or are the revenues generated from advertising, but in online gaming, it's only 5%. And Alvin, you have that wonderful shot from Ready Player One where nobody wants to have ads in your face in an immersive environment. So the first question is, will advertising work in the metaverse, or do marketers need to find other ways in? And what are those other ways in? Alvin, I'd love to hear your point of view.
Yeah, I think the example that's of the theater or movies is actually a much more relevant way of doing advertising versus what we do today on 2D screens. So product placements, messaging placements is actually probably the most effective and non-intrusive way to allow for advertising. In fact, yesterday I was talking to one of our investment team, and they're working with a company that provides the billboards you see on roads inside virtual games or virtual worlds. You can sell that space, and it automatically places for you, or on your coffee cup, it could have logo of Starbucks, or it could have the logo of Pete's Coffee or whatever. So there's places and objects inside virtual worlds that then would be fed into different advertisers. So those are some examples. Of course, you could go into create your own world. Disneyland is an advertising for Disney, right? So that's an experiential advertising. In fact, I think that's that's what a lot of people are trying to do with some of these land purchases, where they create these virtual worlds and they try to become the attraction. I think that's harder because not everybody is a Walt Disney. Not everybody knows how to design a full world experience. But if you work with advertisers to try to create non-invasive, non-intrusive, but transparent advertising that gets put into the story of the worlds that these people are in, I think that's going to be the most effective way.
And maybe the other opportunity is to invert the dynamic and learn from behavior in the world. What I've observed with the metaverse is people often have the optimal version of themselves. A follow-up question, Alvin, is there a data opportunity for marketers to observe patterns and maybe learn more about how to reach consumers?
Oh yeah, I mean, from the data that you saw, even just the heat map data on eye tracking, you can see what are people interested in. If they're in the world and you see, oh, there's a car there, there's a book here, there's a TV there. What are they looking at? And by looking at how long did they stay there, immediately I know what they're interested in. Right. And in fact, there's probably a lot of privacy sensitivity to that, because it may actually disclose things that they don't want to disclose. So there's probably going to be a lot more data than we have today, because all we have today is click and also maybe amount of time on a page. Some media are capturing, like using the camera to see how long you've looked at something. But the amount of data in terms of, because people are putting eye tracking, face tracking, biomarkers, mouth tracking, full motion cameras, all of that is data. And so people can tell a lot about you as a person, much beyond the demographic data that they would also have, based on your address, based on your phone number, based on your IP address, so data scientists are going to be very happy. But again, I think we actually will have more data than we should have in terms of, as advertisers, to influence people. And we just, again, we need to be responsible in terms of what we do with that data.
So my last question before we get to the audience Q&A is simply why and how. And what I mean by that is, I'm a CMO, I'm watching this. It sounds exciting, it's coming. I know I should do this, but tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I've got all my other stuff I have to get done. Why should I start exploring the metaverse as a marketer? And how? What are my next steps? And I'd like to ask each of the panelists. Eli, let me ask you first. Why should I do anything on this exciting new future when I'm so busy, and how do I get started?
Yeah, so I would say it's definitely important for you as a marketer to get started right away, because as the technology is going to evolve, and it clearly is going to evolve, and as the technology evolves and it becomes more interesting for consumers and for creators, we're going to be seeing a lot of more interesting content in there, and a lot more reasons in order for the end consumers to get in these immersive experiences, because it's going to get more fun. It's going to get, your friends are going to be there, and it's going to have amazing experiences, because creators are definitely going to make an effort to create amazing experiences there, and also companies, and also the device developers as well. And so it's definitely going to become more and more interesting. So there's definitely going to be a lot of reasons for end consumers to be there. And wherever the end consumers are, whatever your target audience is, that's the same place that marketers should be, right? So as content consumption is going to evolve, definitely marketers have to follow up with that. So that's a great reason, I think, for marketers to jump in. And in terms of how, there's already a lot of platforms, and I'm not saying these platforms are going to be sticking around in the future, because I completely agree with what Alvin said, in the sense of like, maybe the biggest winner of the future in terms of metaverse it doesn't even exist yet. So if you take a look at, for example, one of the most famous NFT collections, Bored Ape Yacht Club, they have made a lot of money selling their NFT collection, and they're launching their own metaverse. And so in 2019, they didn't even exist, because they were launched in the middle of 2020, right? And so and a lot of people actually bought their Bored Ape Yacht Club NFTs for $200 in 2020, right? So right there, you see a company that didn't exist many years ago, and they're launching their own metaverse, right? They're launching their own metaverse platform. So right there, we can see a great, like one of the biggest winners in the future. I think, when it comes to different platforms that we're going to be seeing in the future, we're going to be seeing niched platforms, in the sense of like, they're going to be platforms that are going to be focused on gaming for children, that are going to be platforms that are going to be focused on social interaction, that are going to be platforms that are going to be focused on whatever other topics, maybe fashion or whatever it is. And so I think we're going to see different platforms, not just, great winners in that sense, like there's one great winner, one great metaverse platform, but several different platforms that serve different purposes. And so when it comes to going back to the how that you can explore right now, just take a look at the platforms that are like people are using right now, and that you can have an immersive experience in. So you can definitely get started with the example that I always like to use, Roblox and Fortnite, which would be, I would like to say that's, one of the first iterations of the actual metaverse that we're going to be seeing in the future. So you can definitely get started right away with that. You can download it on your phone right now and start using. If you have kids, your kids are probably playing Roblox and Fortnite, so play some games with them, see what it's all about. So that's a great way for you to get started right there. If you want a more immersive experience, then you can turn into Meta Horizon Worlds, or you can turn into HTC Metaverse as well. So you can turn into these already existing platforms, VR Chat, and many others out there, and just getting there, have an experience, maybe 1 hour, maybe even less than that a day, so that you can take a look and see how it is and come up with your own conclusions.
Thank you. And Adam, I'm going to give you a variation. This is a question from the audience on the why marketers should care. The question is, Second Life has been around for more than a decade. No device needed. How do we think the metaverse will be better and not fall away like Second Life over time? So I guess to rephrase that, why should I dive in if maybe this is a fad? Adam, what's your take on that as a creator?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty biased because I have a lot more experience in the Web3 world than I do the metaverse. But I actually think, and this goes hand in hand with what Alvin was talking about, with just being moral, like having good morals in this world whenever it comes to what's next. Because whenever you're talking about like decentralization, and you're talking about kind of this co-creation process between the business and the consumer, then like I think it's you're looking at a lot more mutually beneficial situations. And so as far as the why it's going to be sustainable, not just a fad, I mean, you look at kind of what backing up a little bit to like one of the other questions about like the difference between like social media and the metaverse is that and Alvin even already talked about this a little bit, but like social media is an audience and the metaverse is a community. And so that's where we're going to have a lot of those positive ramifications or positive just things that come out of everything that we're seeing happen with the metaverse. And Kathy Hackle, she has a podcast on metaverse marketing, and she actually, and I wrote it down, she states like we're moving from passive appreciation to participative and equity driven fandom, which is essentially co-creation. And so the participation aspect will be substantially impactful because it provides that community is the primary core of the experiences being created for the metaverses. So people are not only going to be a part of something, but they're literally going to reap the financial benefits of it. And she even goes into an example of a platform called Lego World Builder. And Lego World, we all know what Lego World is. So they have a thing called Lego World Builder that allows people to come in, pitch their ideas. They have teams that are external from the company, not employees, that pitch ideas. They get these worlds made, and then their community votes on which one should be established. And then theirs gets picked, Lego World builds it, and then they receive royalties based on how that is used. And so you're looking at a really, really interesting new creator economy opportunity where we are almost forced as companies to have morals because we're now looking at our consumers as a part of what we're doing, as a part of building our brand, as a part of the future of what our metaverse looks like. And so I think that's a really cool opportunity for brands to be extremely authentic, to allow their community to be a part of what they're doing and to say, hey, like, let's shape our metaverse together. And, we can come up with XYZ gamification reward system that keeps people coming back, keeps the community wanting to be invested. And Kathy Hackle even says, like, these people that are involved in Lego world building, they actually prioritize the Lego world building projects over their own projects because of the incentives and the opportunity with Lego World that they didn't have before. So I say that it's going to be sustainable because we're in a new world of what community is going to look like, and creators are going to be it's going to be mutually beneficial for creators.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, I'll wrap this with two final questions, rephrasing our audience questions. One is, are there best practices in creative on the metaverse for marketers, and how do you find outlets, e.g. media placement on the metaverse? Alvin, any early paths in for marketers that you could identify?
So I think in terms of creatives, I go back to what I just said earlier is think about how advertising happens in the offline world, right? That's probably going to be more synonymous to the types of creatives that will work in the real world. How do people market? How do people sell? How do people promote if you're meeting somebody in person? How do you create that relationship and conversation and trust? Much more than what we do today, where it's really about putting a banner up, targeting, who you think would be the best target customer based on the data. I think creating a long-term relationship with the customer is really the key. Once you have that, then as a brand, you can communicate in a proper way. If you make a new friend, you're not going to start dumping on them and making them buy stuff the first day you meet them. So just kind of a common sense approach in terms of how we would do it. So don't rely on what's worked online, because it's a different reality. It's a much more synonymous to the physical world in terms of people's behavior and their tendencies and their norms versus what's happening today online.
Thank you. My last question, and I'll ask this of each of you, we'll go around. One of the questions was, what about the bad guys in bunny suits on the metaverse? But the alternative is HTC has a wonderful line somewhere in your materials about the metaverse can help us become better versions of ourselves. So here's the question, and I'll start with Eli. How do we avoid the bad future, and what is your vision for the optimal use of the metaverse?
I think it's gonna have to be kind of a joint effort in terms of like not enabling people to be the bad guys in the metaverse, because there's definitely, if you give people the tools in the metaverse so that they can do whatever they want in terms of advertising, there's definitely people that are going to try to explore that. They're going to be focused on the profit. So I think it's going to be a joint effort in the sense of like the platforms setting some type of guardrails around that, so that it doesn't, these platforms not allowing these things to happen. So it must have certain limits and certain boundaries, just like we have today. So if you try to advertise, still to this day, surprisingly, if you try to advertise crypto in Google Ads, you're not going to be able to do it, because Google Ads has some boundaries around that. So they have certain limits around that. So I think the same concept must be applied to the metaverse, but maybe in an even more strict way, because now it's a lot more immersive than just, you looking for something on Google. And so in that sense, I think it's going to require guardrails. And at the same time, like for users as well, users being able to identify these harmful experiences and reporting them to the platform so that they can like co-create a more pleasing experience around that and create a more fun space to be in. So I think that's potentially one of the ways that we can use in order to address, let's say, the bad guys. And when it comes to an optimal experience, that was mentioned quite a few times here in the panel already, and I would like to reiterate because I really agree with it. Like, I think the best way for you to create an amazing experience that users actually love is for you to connect with them on a personal level, in the sense of like understanding what they like and really putting some time and really putting an effort in order to create something that they're actually going to love, and not necessarily creating something that is going to convert them, or maybe like coming up with the AI that has the best sales script in the world and has the best copywriting script in the world, and like, let's try to convert these guys and increase their ROI. I would say it's more of about like creating a fun experience that users are going to love to interact with. They're going to love to be around with, like they're going to love to be inside of, and like really creating this fun thing, that people genuinely love, and that people later on are going to tell their friends like, oh, look, I was in this brand's experience and it was awesome. Like they did this and that, and it was amazing. Like I had the best time in the metaverse I've ever had, like, or maybe that I've had so far. And then they're organically telling their friends and like just interacting with it organically. So I would say that's the best way to nail the good part of like creating experiences in the metaverse.
And for the other two panelists, Eli, the optimal metaverse, what does it look like when we get there?
That's
I'm sorry, Eli. Adam, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm bouncing around.
Yeah, that's a good question. As far as how we get there, I kind of piggybacking off of Eli, I think other than the technological, innovations that have to be made, which actually kind of plays into this, like co-creation is such a big part of this. Whenever you're talking about, companies establishing what their place looks like in, the metaverse. And I think even co-creation with, developers, look at the game developers in Roblox. I mean, just like everything that they've been able to do and co-create, like that's how we're going to be able to get there, is working together. And again, piggybacking off of Eli, I agree that, as long as you're focused on how to make a better, more immersive experience for your community, your people, and that's the focus, rather than exploiting your community to grow and to get more money on the table. That's what's going to help us get there in a more positive light. I mean, that's what's going to get us away from the depression, suicide, addiction of social media that we've seen ramifications of in the past 10 years. And we're going to be able to get towards better mental health, economic sustainability. People are starting to feel like they belong to communities. You're gonna have a lot more creativity and collaboration, a lot more personable experiences for your community. You're gonna have easier access to resources, whether it's education or therapy or telemedical. And, you know, I also hope and believe that creatives and storytellers will thrive as more and more mutually beneficial collaborative like opportunities present themselves whenever companies adopt metaverse and Web3 as necessary, you know, strategies. And so, yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a very collaborative effort between the producers and consumers in order to get there.
And Alvin, final word, what does the optimal metaverse look like?
I guess to me, and actually to your security question, I do want to answer that a little bit before the optimal question, because I used to work for a data security, cybersecurity company. And I think we need to be conscious that no matter what we do, how moral we are, there's always going to be people that will try to get around the rules. So it's important to have clear regulations. It's important to have clear law enforcement inside the metaverse. So, but it's always going to be a cat and mouse game. So you can't win. It's going to, you know, people are going to try to hack your system. They're going to try to, you know, misuse it. They're going to try to, you know, get into your data. They're going to try to do things that you shouldn't do. And it's the responsibility of the platform providers and the governments to make sure that it happens as few as possible. And then when it does happen, that, you know, people are caught and prosecuted, and, you know, just like they are in the real world. So, because I think a crime in the virtual world will be as powerful as a crime in the real world in terms of its impact on your lives. So now to the question of kind of what is the optimal result. I think the optimal result is we have a open borderless metaverse that overlays the real world and allows us to have a better physical world. So it's not a replacement, it's an expansion of the physical world. And it's something that allows people to no longer be locked into the conditions of how they were born. You know, people don't get to choose who they're born by and where they're born. And unfortunately, those factors affect the future of a person's life and how they develop and how much education they get and, you know, what quality of life they have, more than any other thing that they can do. And this technology, you know, essentially frees us from that burden and lets people reach their full potential, or has the ability to let people reach their full potential. You know, this kind of goes back to our mission of unleashing, you know, human imagination from the limitations of reality. And the reality today, the physical reality has a lot of limitations. And if we can use this technology to unleash and deshackle ourselves as much as we can, and that's the full potential. It's not going to be a perfect world, as I said in the beginning. It's not going to be a utopia, but you know, there are a lot of things, a lot of issues in this world that will get better if we utilize the benefits of the technology and not really. I really want to make advertising not be the primary revenue source for this world, right? Because it is going to be a full economy. I want people to understand that. Whereas, you know, on the initial internet, advertising, you know, fed a lot of things and it allowed for the free content to flow. But I think we may need to take a different perspective and not make advertising the primary the primary concern in terms of how do we monetize this system. So.
Well, thank you, Alvin, Eli, Adam. You've been an amazing group. Especially you, Alvin, getting up very early in China to participate. And I hope we're right. I hope we build a community that is a better place for us all to improve ourselves. So I'm going to throw back to my colleague, Mel Brockway, and we'll close.
Thank you, Ben. That was incredible. So thank you all for joining us for this evening's event. We hope you found it informative and enjoyable. The AMA of Southern Connecticut offers in-person and virtual networking and educational events just like this one on a pretty regular basis. So make sure you keep an eye out for emails and social posts on LinkedIn and Facebook for upcoming events and promotions just like the one we're running now. It's almost over. But if you join AMA Southern CT chapter by November 1st, you'll get access to a year's worth of events for free. So thank you again and have a wonderful evening.
Great. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.